How good is that music? It's rocking. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the MAP. Good morning. Welcome to the MAP, the Mental Health and Addiction Podcast. We started this podcast back in January of 2019 to help bring light to issues around mental health and addiction. As you may know or heard, 1 in 5 people in the U.S. struggle with mental health issues, and over 70,000 people have overdosed. And this is an issue that affects communities and does not discriminate based on geography or economic status. Mental health and addiction affects us all. So today we have a very special guest, Montgomery Moran, to share her story of her brother, NFL All-Pro punter Greg Montgomery. But before we get started, let's meet the panel. I like that, to meet the panel. Joining us as always is the great Kristen Perry Long, who is down in Florida. I feel very left out.
No, huh?
Chris, who are you? What do you do? What's your deal?
I don't know, man. I got all this old people air. I think I'm losing brain cells living here.
Yep.
Just kidding. My name is Chris Perry Long. I am a family educator for Aware Recovery Care. We are an in-home addiction treatment program that's can be 52 weeks long. It's an amazing program. And I didn't choose addiction. Addiction chose my kids. And and that's it in a nutshell.
All right. And you love your job with Aware.
I love my job.
You love your job, and you're not in a car today driving somewhere, nor doing laundry,
Laundry,
or on a picnic, or
making a
looking at
sandwich.
birds. Okay, very good. And we also have the great Willie Drinkwater. Willie, who are you?
Hi ho, hello. Person in long-term recovery, been working in the field of mental health and addiction for over 30 years now. Work with addiction with co-occurring disorders, mental health. Dual diagnosis is the expectation, not the exception. I'm also an educator for UMass Boston and the Addiction Counseling Education Program.
And you worked at the Rock of Boston, WBCN.
In the old days, WBCN, the Rock of Boston, 104.1.
And you're a former hockey goalie. All right.
Yes.
All right, let's get started the show. We'll hear from Margo in a minute.
Wait, who are you?
Yes. Oh,
yeah. Who are you?
Okay, my name is Andy Bernstein. I have.
Okay, that's enough.
Oh yeah, forget it. I've been working. Somehow I stumbled in this space. I used to host a radio show. Created a radio show with Kevin Stevens, former NHL player, and about addiction and mental health. And while I'm not in recovery per se, I am on a journey, as we all are recovering. We're all recovering from something. So. So I really became passionate about this space, and I wanted to use media and my background to help others bring to light this disorder or disease that's affecting so many people. So, does that work for you, Chris? Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay. So I pulled a quick article, and I just wanted to bring this up because, with being home and there's so many opportunities for social media to connect with people. There was an article from a TV station in Harrisburg, ABC 27 in Harrisburg, and the title, Social Media Usage Linked to Mental Health. So while a great platform to connect with family and friends, social media can also be damaging to our mental health. Right now, especially with the recent election and the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, experts warn of spending too much time on social media apps. And a recent study at the University of Pennsylvania followed 103 graduates as they limited social media usage to 10 minutes per day. At the end of the 3 weeks, researchers found a significant reduction in loneliness and depression, as well as decreases in anxiety and fear of missing out. And so what you can do is you can actually check your social media usage on screen time on your iPhone, and there's ways to limit your app usage and schedule downtime away from your phone. So I love this because we've heard that social media can affect mental health, but this actually puts some numbers behind this theory. So Chris and Willie, what are your thoughts about this? Does social media ever factor into your worlds of addiction? Does that ever become a trigger for people?
Yeah. I mean, you get people that get stuck in an algorithm too, where, they read something negative and then everything they're being fed after that is another negative article. So, I mean, if you get stuck in an algorithm, it can be detrimental, to say the least.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's like news, social media, kind of they're cousins, right? They're just, and social media is very one-sided, because typically it's presented in a way that, like the whole. So I have a friend who
You do?
I do. I have one
Okay.
friend,
Okay,
and they
good.
used to be my neighbor, and they are very politically one-sided, and um, believe that like this whole corona thing is not real. That being said, it's, you watch the news and the news says it is real. You watch the numbers and it says it is real. And then you have this person that is, and it's like,
It's a highlight reel. It's a highlight reel.
you find yourself like, are you that like, I believe it's real. Like the news tells me it's real, but then you question. So then you go back and forth. And so then you have somebody that's vulnerable and, you know, can't handle that conflict. And so what do? They self-medicate.
Well, they just had an interview with that nurse. I think it was in Iowa and stuff, and she was saying that, people were in the hospital, dying of the virus, and they were angry because this isn't supposed to be real. This isn't real. And
Their last dying words was,
yeah,
"This isn't real."
yeah, this isn't real.
Yeah, there's no accountability on this thing whatsoever. I mean, so it's
No, I mean, how long have we been, like now they talk of news cycles. They never talked about news cycle when I was growing up, the news cycle, and
Well, and now everything is the vaccination is knocking at your door. You're right. The vaccination, they're saying we're going to get it by December. We're going to get it by April. We're going to get it by January. So the whole anticipation and the whole misconception, and it's like, you know what? Until something is concrete, until it's out the door and it's on its way, don't report it. Don't report it. Don't tell us we're going to get these vaccinations in December when actually we're not going to get them. And to be honest, like, I don't really know if I want this vaccination because it's 6 months old. And how can you have a study?
Well, you don't want the vaccination, because Microsoft is going to be putting a chip in it to follow you.
All right, so like we always do, we've gone off on a complete tangent, right?
Yeah,
we'll be back, though. We'll switch channels, and we'll get back to where we were.
Yes.
At another point in time. Okay, let's shift gears.
Yep.
Joining us today is our special guest, Margot Montgomery Moran. Margot is the sister of former NFL All-Pro punter Greg Montgomery. So first of all, Margot, I wore my Tigers hat for you today.
I appreciate that.
The D. All right. You and I haven't spoke, but we've talked via online, and so it's nice to meet you. But let me give you a quick background. So Margot's brother Greg played in the NFL from 1988 to 1997 for the Houston Oilers, Detroit Lions, and Baltimore Ravens. He was a standout punter at Michigan State and was chosen to be on their all-centennial super squad. I actually met Greg in 2010 at the Super Bowl Media Row before the 2010 Super Bowl between the Saints and Colts. And a friend of mine from Baltimore, where I grew up, knew Greg from his Ravens days and thought he and I should definitely connect. So she introduced us, and Greg and I spent about 2 hours that day talking about his life after football and his desire to form a coalition of sorts of like-minded folks who are about ending the stigma around mental health. And so Greg shared with me his personal battles with bipolar depression or with bipolar disorder, and how he wanted to help others with the platform he had as a former NFL player. And he and I got into some pretty deep stuff and a lot of laughs that day. I was peddling barbecue sauce, and I had all my bottles of barbecue sauce, and I'm fumbling and stuff, and he's like clank 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 clank. Anyway, that day we also saw 60 Minutes legend Andy Rooney sleeping, and Greg's like, he's sleeping, let's go wake him up. And so we went and tapped on him, and so it was funny. So we got a picture with him. There it is. It was so funny. So he had a few nicknames for me and teased me about being scattered. I love the guy, and I didn't talk to him that much over the years. I had him on my radio show in 2018, and he fired off an email to me that he lost his mom, and I replied and texted him, but I didn't get any answer. So this past August, I was looking at Facebook and noticed there was now a Gregory H. Montgomery Jr. Foundation, and I knew that Greg had wanted to do something like this to share his story and help others. But I read further and I discovered that Greg succumbed to the mental illness that affected him. Really hit me hard, and a great guy with a huge heart and love for people. So ironically, I'm writing this up yesterday, I'm typing it, and I felt Greg talking to me. It was weird. Ando, thanks for helping, or thanks for doing this. I really did feel it was weird. So I had reached out to his sister Margot to come on our show and to talk about Greg and the work she's doing and the mission of helping those who struggle with mental health. So welcome to the show, Margot.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry about the preamble.
Oh, it's all good. It's,
What?
So I don't know, what I don't know the full story. I don't know what you're comfortable in talking about, but could you tell us a little bit about Greg and kind of his story and, kind of how his, how mental health and bipolar affected him?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I have to tell you that in such a heartbreaking time in my life, I've never felt more held up at the same time. So it's bizarre. There's so much love and support out there, and I appreciate you having this platform. It's so needed.
Thank you. And Willie.
Absolutely.
And Chris. Yeah.
And I found this when I was packing my dad's house up. So I just got back from tennis. Here's some Oiler swag.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyway, got to represent.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you the promo we did because I have him in his Oilers uniform punting.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, so Greg, I'm not used to the word was, and I probably will say is because he will always be my oldest brother. So Greg is my oldest brother. Growing up, he and I was the little pain in the neck. And I definitely ticked him off a lot. And, but over the years, I'd say, late high school, early college years, we really, really got close. He is a very, spiritual person. He was a really deep person. He cared so much about people being heard. My parents recognized that there was some issues going on when he was younger, and when we were growing up, it wasn't readily talked about. So growing up, he was very serious, and he was a perfectionist, and that got in his way. And it was kind of a good thing when it came to perfecting his kicking and punting. However, it's a hard measure, right? Like perfection's a hard measure. And so over the years, I'm trying to think, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 96 or 97, I think. He was with the Ravens. And I know that he was self-medicating a lot before that. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm sober. I'm recovering. I met my husband in AA.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I've been sober about 30 years. So when I saw Greg spiraling a lot, I knew what I was looking at. And he was very open with me. I'll never forget my 21st birthday. He flew me down to Houston and took me to the Rolling Stones. He treated me to a spa day and bought me a brand new outfit. And he was just so proud that his sister was sober. He thought that was really cool. And he would say, my sister's awesome. She doesn't even drink. Isn't that? And I know that he really thought that was cool. I don't think that he ever really felt that was attainable for him. So I was young when I got sober. And many times we would have interventions and we'd talk to Greg about destructive behavior. And, you know, when you look back at it, you realize it was self-medicating.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really hard because he was so successful. And I think he would justify it with, well, you know, I play in the NFL and I do a pretty darn good job. And, but that doesn't always necessarily mean somebody's well or happy, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I specifically remember a time when he called me and he was lost. And this is before he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was depressed. And he actually sought God and was baptized in his pool in Houston. He was always someone that believed in a higher power. He knew, you know, that there was this great, huge force out there and that we're all part of it, you know.
Right.
He would always say, you are it. Not necessarily meaning, you know, that we're divine, but more you are it, like as a collective, that all of us are pieces of that you.
Right.
And he would always talk about what you put out in the universe is going to come get you. So,
Karma.
you know, exactly, you know, it's just what you do and say on a continual basis will eventually come out in action. Right. And,
Right.
so that it kind of goes back to what you guys were talking about with the whole COVID thing and the social media thing and the all encompassing, trauma of this time in our lives, you know.
It got to him.
Oh, he spun out.
Well, so let me back up for a second.
Yeah.
So your family is, good looking family. Your dad was played at Michigan State. I believe he was a quarterback.
Yep.
Okay, he played. So you're a legacy family. Greg played, wanted to be a linebacker, is what?
Yes. Yep.
But punting was kind of something because of injuries, I guess. He went into punting.
Yeah, he slipped discs in his back when he was, I believe, a sophomore in high school. And the doctor told him he couldn't play contact sports. Well, mind you, hockey was his number one love. He was a great hockey player. He was a great baseball player, which not so much contact, but he loved football too. And so he would get up, and this is before he had a license. So yeah, he was like 15. I think he was a sophomore in high school. My mom used to drive him to the Y at 5 a.m. where he'd swim laps to strengthen his back. And he was very dedicated and he wanted to play football. And he actually wrote down, and I wish I had it.
The check?
Sorry?
The check, he put, didn't he like write a check saying he's going to have $1 million contract and he...
Yes, that's right. That's a story too. But there's also a note he wrote saying his goals. And he was like 15 years old. And he said, I will be a special teams member in the NFL by blah, blah, blah. And my mom actually framed it and he kept it all those years. And he had it framed. And then I don't know what happened to it. Truly, I feel like I'm coming out of a blackout after losing him. My Greg called, or my dad called me on August 23rd after Greg had died. And my dad, by the way, what a freaking rock star hero. He's my hero too. The two Gregs, right? But anyway, my dad called me and I was on a 6 a.m. flight, the 24th. And so when I say that I feel like I'm just coming out of it, I had to go back to my emails and text and reread things because I was just, but anyway, when I was packing up the house, I was looking for that framed, because it meant a lot to him that he fulfilled his goal. And he didn't say, I want to. He said, I will.
Right. So he when he retired, he started teaching punting. He had a unique style. What was it? The set and pull.
That's exactly right. Yep. Set and pull
See?
technique. Yeah.
And so he had this unique punting, and it was kind of zen in the art of punting. So he would teach former players on how to adopt his approach. So Donnie Jones was one of his big proteges, and Nick Saban was somebody that he played for when Nick was a coach at Michigan State, if I'm correct. And then Nick went to Alabama, and Greg and he stayed in touch. So Nick would bring him in to teach his punters on his approach. So so Greg, and I remember that he told me that he headed down to IMG Academy for training, to be a part of their football program. And apparently it didn't work out for him. And I think he was pretty devastated by that. So let's fast forward, Margot. And I don't really know the details, right? I know that, succumbed to mental illness. Can you kind of talk a little bit about kind of what happened? Because I don't know. I just read stuff. So I don't know if you feel comfortable about talking about that.
Oh, you know what? I take a deep breath and I'll tell you anything, because it's very important for everybody to know this stuff, right? I mean, silence is what keeps everything going on, in a negative way. So, so Greg, so he talked to you about losing my mom, right? And so it was a year, October 19th, 2020. So October 19th, 2019 is when my mom died. And she, that was hard. But anyway, she had cancer. She was diagnosed in January, or she told us at least in January, because she didn't want to ruin our Christmas. That's so mom. Anyway, they gave her 2 to 3 months without treatment, and with treatment 10 to 12 months. And my dad and mom discussed it, and she said, you know what, I feel great. I don't want to, last longer and feel sick. So she, with the help of Greg, he was absolutely fabulous. And what a rock star. So my mom went on a keto diet and ate everything clean and took supplements. And between my dad and my brother, they cared for her. She lived 9 months, and she was so great. In the last few weeks of her illness is really the only time she looked sick or acted sick and felt sick. And fortunately, Greg was there and was doing great. And he would go through bouts of being well. And that's why it's so hard. It's so difficult. He would have a few years at a time where he was just rocking and rolling. And then he would self-medicate, and I think people talk about the legalization of marijuana and how wonderful it is and this and that. And it's like, you know what, that was gasoline on Greg's fire. It was, and obviously he did it to self-medicate, I think maybe when he was becoming manic. And so then he would, when he would go down that rabbit hole, mania is pretty scary stuff. I'm trying to think so he was great all through my mom's illness. And he was working with an organic skincare line, and they're awesome people too.
KPS.
Yes, exactly.
KPS Essentials. Right.
Yes. Yep. And they actually give the foundation part of their proceeds of when somebody buys a KPS product, they put some back into the foundation. They loved Greg, and they had a great rapport with him. And so anyway, but I just wanted to mention them because they're an all organic, because Greg was very much into what you put into your body and what you put on your body is to be
Wheatgrass
healthy.
I had with him, and I thought it was lawn clippings. It was the worst thing I've ever tasted in my life. It was so bad. And he had flew out to San Francisco when I was there for my wife's conference, and we're walking the street. He's like, "I'll be out there, right?" And he's like, "I'm coming out." So he comes out, and we're walking the street. I'm just remembering this now. Oh, hey, let's go get wheatgrass.
You're like, heck no.
A shot of wheatgrass. I'm like, are you kidding? That's the most disgusting thing. I really could have taken my bag of lawn clippings and ate it. It was awful. So anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
That's hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, so he was working with them doing brand marketing, and it was a great time in his life. And it happened to be about the time when my mom was ill, and he really helped take care of her. And then my mom passed away in October, and then he went out on the road, and he would coach punting clinics, and we talked about that. Actually, Nick Saban, like you said, coached him at Michigan State, but Greg moved down to Baton Rouge when he was at LSU before Alabama. Oh. And worked, with that set and pull technique. And that's where I think he met Donnie Jones. I think down at LSU. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he maintained those relationships, with different NFL players and also NCAA coaches, where he'd do little clinics to help the punters. And so he went out doing that in the spring, and I can't tell you exactly this whole year has been just kind of a big poop emoji. Yeah. So I'm trying to remember. But anyway, so he went off and did that, where he'd go to different places, and he'd always go down south. I know he would go to Alabama. And then this June was the first time where he didn't go to Alabama to coach Nick's kids. Okay. Because of COVID. But every spring and summer, he would do that. But anyway, with bipolar disorder, I don't know if you've read up on it, but it's very cyclical. And so he'd be doing great. And then all of a sudden it just wouldn't be so great. And I think what happened with that IMG thing, I think he was manic.
Oh, okay.
And that did not help him. Unfortunately, he felt that it needed to be the Greg show and not their brand show. And that's just brutal honesty, right? I mean, that's some hard stuff to have to contend with. And then once people have been manic, and then they come down and they suffer the depression of the part of the illness, that can be months at a time. And I do remember that IMG thing. I remember I'm not saying when he came to, but definitely when he came out of the manic part and then more into the depressive part, he would tell me, "Oh, I can't believe I did this again," and had shame. And that's all part of this roller coaster with bipolar disorder. And I really believe that had we had more tools when we were younger, that something would have been more identified in him at a younger age. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's crucial for our children to have, or the parents and children to be educated on all this before people get into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Last week, our guest was Stephanie Marcasano with the Harris Project, who I want to connect you with.
She was fabulous. I watched that. It was
okay.
Yeah.
She definitely wants to meet you, and I'm going to make a connection. And we actually have an idea to bounce off you as well. Stephanie's lovely, and so I guess because I know it's all been a blur. What were there some certain events that kind of triggered Greg in this particular thing, and was it when Willie is an addiction counselor and Chris works in more than an addiction counselor, he's an addiction specialist. Willie suffers from bipolar disorder too, I may have a small, I take medicine for it. It's a low lying, but I take medicine for it. Chris, nice face. And, and,
Well, I didn't know we were like having all these full disclosures. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I'm learning something new. No,
I'm proud of it.
I used to do the blog, The Bipolar Counselor. So, I mean, I'm out there anyway.
I'm very curious about, and Willie, maybe you can kind of like, before we dive into, are there things that are absolute red flags as a child that can kind of open our eyes? You talk about education and stuff, but are there like behaviors that might just be fluffed off?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking like about that kid that locks themselves in the room and pulls the shades down. Obviously, that's depression, but
yeah. I mean, with the bipolar pieces too, if it comes out in early adolescent and teen, if I was a social worker, I'd call it oppositional defiant disorder. It's like there's real agitation, and just you say yes, and I'm going to automatically say no, and it can be misinterpreted as it's just a phase they're going through. But usually, the teens and stuff, oftentimes if the bipolar piece is coming out, it's agitation. It comes out as a real edge on it and stuff. But I usually see people, I mean, it runs in families. There definitely is a hereditary part to it. The only other time I've seen the diagnosis is if someone's suffered a head trauma, and that can bring on the diagnosis too. But the bipolar 2, you can rapid cycle all over the place. Bipolar 1 tends to be the one that I think I'm hearing about here. It tends to be a secular thing, a cycle, and I mean, when I work inpatient psych, fall and winter, people would go into a depressive phase, and spring and summer they'd go into manic stages. They're doing a lot of research now in the Scandinavian countries on seasonal affective disorder and bipolar disorder. There seems to be a correlation between them, so. But yeah.
Well, that's curious about the seasonal, because it sounds like he was seasonal. He would go through these cycles of ups and then downs. But now, Willie, can a pre-teen have bipolar?
Yeah, I'm not really too keen on when I see a Boston psychiatrist diagnose it and someone that's 3 or 4 years old. I mean, and wants to put them on medication at 3 or 4. I mean, you're talking about a developing brain. I mean, the human brain develops right until age 25. So, I mean, do you really want to be, altering neural pathways at 3 or 4 years old? So.
Well, how important? This was one of my questions for you, Margot. How important is, and you guys can answer, the family dynamic? Are there any, not clinical, but are there any things that can go along in the house, whether it's trauma or things like trauma? That can help exacerbate that or trigger that? Is there something that brings that out?
Well, I know with, as far as my memory of Greg, because he's 4 years older than me, it was definitely a walk on eggshells household. Like if Greg was not having a good day, we all just kind of, laid low. And like what I was saying, he was a perfectionist. He wanted things perfect. Right. And my parent, and then he would, this is a perfect example. So he made his bed, and if there was like a wrinkle in it, if it wasn't exactly right, he'd rip the sheet off, like rip the comforter off and start over until it was absolutely perfect. I know that sounds silly, but I'm just saying
Right.
So he was very much like that. He was all in whatever he was focused on. And so my parents did back then. I mean, you're talking late 70s, early 80s. No, not early 80s, probably late 70s. Took him to a psychiatrist or a psychologist because my mom thought that was not normal, because my mom was a teacher before she had kids. She was a teacher. She was around a lot of children, and she was concerned about it enough where I thought was so heads up back then.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about it since, of course. And but anyway, so fast forward to high school, and he was just getting offer letters all over the place because he was a perfectionist and excelled. He was a natural born athlete, and he excelled. But I think in college, in high school and college, he self-medicated by first maybe experimenting with drinking and then other things later on. And to be honest, and this is something that I used to always be so upset about. He'd always say we, meaning because I was sober, and he's like, well, you know how it is with us. And I said, Greg, we're different. I said, I don't have bipolar disorder. I'm sober. Because he was trying to explain to me, well, you know what I mean? Because he'd get hung up on one thing and it would just exacerbate. And I'd say, you just have to let it go. And my AA tools doesn't necessarily work 100% for somebody that really should be on medication. And I know there's lots of controversy. I think sometimes people tend to push the medication too much, and I do believe that. So I don't discount that. However, I do believe there's a time and place for medication. And, you know, when Greg had his manic break, he was probably 30, 31. I'm just trying to do the math. Anyway, it was way past the time where my parents would have had a say in it. And, but we tried. I mean, I took him to Hazelden, and that was only one component. And even when I got on the plane with him, and bless his heart, you know, he held my hand. He was like, thank you so much, sis. And he loved being there because they were working on all sorts of stuff. And he was diagnosed as having dual diagnosis,
Right.
as being an addict and also having bipolar depression, bipolar disorder, actually, that it wasn't called bipolar depression. But something that you said about a head trauma, and I think Greg, because of his predisposition with that perfectionist type mentality when he was growing up and not being able to let things go, like I'm pretty laid back. I mean, I like all my ducks in a row, but I don't get hung up on stuff just because I've learned that's not healthy for me. And but when it's a chemical imbalance, it's hard for somebody to let go of stuff. But anyway, yeah, you know, yeah. And but you think about Greg, he started playing contact sports at a very young age, hockey and football. And you hear this discussion about, oh, you know, CTE. And my dad and my brother Stevie, who's 2 years older than me, he's the middle guy. After Greg died, we sat and we just had a talk, and we said, well, let's donate some tissue so that, you know, so Greg's brain could be examined, just for educational purposes. It was a difficult conversation.
Was it with Chris Nowinski's group?
I'm sorry?
The Concussion Legacy Foundation?
Boston University?
Yeah, Chris Nowinski. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the name. I just know it was at Boston University.
Okay. Yeah.
And they said that it might take up to 12 months to get any report from that. But anyway, but my point is, any information we could possibly get to be able to talk it out, you know, we're willing to do. And but we were talking, I just kind of wanted to go back to how, yes, you're right, it's cyclical, and he'd have great bouts of time where, especially routine, he did very well. He did, you know, he was in the mortgage business with a former player that he played with at Michigan State with, and he was with them for 4 or 5, maybe 6 years. And when they called, you know, all these phone calls my dad received. I mean, Nick Saban called my dad, Coach D'Antonio called my dad, like all these different coaches Greg worked with and played for. They all said the same thing of how passionate he was and how he told his story, and he was brave. And when you talk to anybody that's been coached by Greg or that was around Greg coaching kids, it was 90% the kid and 10% the coaching. He wanted people to feel well, you know?
He tell you he love you when you hang out with him, love you, right?
And he meant it.
Oh, UG, Uncle Greg. Okay, so can we go back to kind of, because I think this would be helpful if you're okay with it, but what happened? Like, what was the, what
Spiral?
triggered this whole thing? Yeah, what chain of events?
Well, obviously, when we lost our mom, he was doing great. And we, grief is a weird thing. It comes and goes and has different things, I don't know, coping mechanisms. And, but as far as like right before, my dad had called me and he said, Greg's really wigging out about this COVID thing. And I said, well, I bet he is. And because my poor dad, he was taking a nap. Now, mind you, my dad's 83 and he is so healthy, which is awesome. But even more than that, he's very mentally healthy. And, but he was taking a nap. And I said, I'm 52 and I take a nap every once in a while,
Right.
But anyway, the poor thing, my dad was taking a nap and Greg woke him up and said, Dad, they're here. You have to come here. And my dad said, who's here? Well, Greg called the paramedics because he wanted my dad to be tested for COVID. And he was just so spun out about that. And
Hypervigilant, right?
Oh, my dad would call me and say, Greg's called me. Greg comes into my room or my office every 5 minutes and says, you okay, pal? You okay? And it breaks my heart that he was that worried about my dad. However, it's just, when you say what happened, well, that spun him out.
Okay.
The being the isolation. And when I forget, one of you were talking about how when you listen to the same thing, the algorithm or all this negativity, and then someone that has a chemical imbalance, it's really hard to let it go.
Yeah.
And
haven't slept in 4 years. I literally haven't slept in 4 years. Because I watch the news constantly. Nonstop.
I know. And that's like today.
I have a hard time doing it. I have a hard time letting that go.
Why don't you stop watching the news? We've been talking about this for 51 episodes about how we aren't watching the news. Why don't you not watch the news?
Well, we'll talk about that on another episode.
That's another show.
Not about me. Don't project to me, right? Don't put it on.
Sorry.
When you point a finger, 3 are going back at you, huh? Okay, so
I think I heard that in a program once.
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
So I guess before we go into talking about the foundation and what you're trying to accomplish, how do I phrase this?
What happened next? When he was
how did he do this? Did he leave a note? What was the kind of the?
No, so this is what happened. He was, obsessed, and that's the true word. He was obsessed with my dad's health. Anytime my dad would blow his nose, he would call me. And I said, Greg, he's got allergies. I promise you he's well. My dad had just had a physical and the doctor quote said, you're healthier than some, younger guys,
Right.
So it wasn't as if he was being sensitive and nobody was listening. And, I think what I have to go back to is he was so obsessed with the whole COVID thing and with my dad, I finally was able to talk to him. And I said, Greg, I really think you're projecting a worry of yourself onto Dad. And I said, do me a favor. I said, I want you to call a doctor and you can do the telehealth. You don't have to go anywhere. There's telehealth appointments available. And I want you to talk to somebody. And because Greg had like 3 different COVID tests. And I said, because he just said, oh, I'm scared I'm going to give Dad COVID. I said, you're not. You tested negative. You guys have been very good, about getting stuff delivered. And, I said, just relax. And then I finally was able to talk to him. And I said, please do me a favor and get an appointment and talk about your fears to either a physician or a psychologist. I said, because this is not okay. We've done checks A, B, and C. You're healthy. Dad's healthy. So let's talk about why you're so obsessed with this. And he thanked me. He said, thank you, sis. I think you're right. And so I was relieved because he was listening. Mm-hmm. And he had made a couple appointments, and he made a telehealth appointment. And he was going to go in. He called me the next day and he said, I'm getting a full physical on September 3rd. And that was, so I guess it would have been 10 days out or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was, so I felt relieved, at least he was trying. And my dad, I said, how's he doing? And he said, well, he still looks at me, but I think he fights asking me if I'm okay, because he knows that he probably thinks that, you're right, that I think it's overboard. And I said, okay. Well, my dad went to get Greg to watch the ball game. The baseball they were watching, the Tigers were on, and he went downstairs and he found him. And then he called me. My dad called me. So, I rewind those tapes like a lot, that's hard to say.
It's not your fault, right? You know that you did everything that you can, right?
Absolutely, 100%. I do. I know that.
Was he actively so he was using marijuana, and then was he, because I remember he had bad back pain and he was using painkillers for a while. Was he using painkillers at the time?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, one of the troubling things with marijuana, though, with the bipolar piece is that, it doesn't necessarily calm you down. It can disinhibit you, and then you can really go off into mania. So
that's, what, you 100% nailed it, because a lot of times he'd start to use the marijuana when he was hypomanic, not quite full-blown mania, but just to keep a lid on it. And that is, like I mentioned before, that's like gasoline on a fire. And he was talking about like these conspiracies. And I mean, I just said,
going into delusional thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Full
mania. And then, but by the time when I said that, and I wrote that in the obit when I said he succumbed to his illness. Yeah. I wasn't ready to say, he died by suicide, But I will forever, carry the message to help people, because if it could happen to Greg, so I'm just saying that my parents and my brother and I, we've been very supportive all through the years. It's been a long, multi-year battle. Yeah. He never truly gave medicine a try. He was on lithium, and it made his hands shaky, and he wanted to play football still. So he stopped taking that. And then, like I mentioned before, I think if there were more resources when we were growing up, like when he was in high school, if there was a program he could have gone to, or a counselor at an earlier age where that maybe he could have been medicated if needed be. Like, I'm not pushing medication, but I do believe he should have been on it.
Yeah, I
You know,
mean,
the other
it's so important to get the information out there now. Like nowadays, I mean, they've been around for a long time. There's a community support, DBSA, Depression Bipolar Support
Yep.
Alliance, and
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they have groups for depression. They have groups for bipolar issues. They have friends and family group too, because friends and family can often end up more twisted than the patient themselves
Yeah.
Amen,
because they're
brother.
trying to help
Yeah,
out.
we know.
Yeah,
we
you know.
yeah we
But there's also there's alternative programs for bipolar disorder as far as medication goes. Like McLean Hospital up here, they've had a taurine amino acid study for bipolar 2 for 30 years. They've had an omega-3 fish oil study for 30 years. And it's like, you know, that may not be in and of itself, you know, enough, but it cuts down on the psychopharm end of it. If these holistic approaches are working to a great extent, then you don't have to add on as much psychopharm. So,
And you know what, when he was doing that, like eating clean, and when
Mhm.
I talked about having a schedule, and he would get up and he'd work out, he'd go to work, he'd come home, he'd make dinner for my parents, you know what I mean? Like he'd
Yeah.
have this schedule, and he was so good. He was
Yeah.
so good. And
do you think that your mom's passing also was a trigger for him to start to really look at your father more? Like, I don't want to
I
lose
think
dad.
it,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, yeah, my mom was a really cool lady. So she got sober. I'm trying to think how long after me. I think a few years after I got sober. You know, she said, I'm just going to quit drinking to support Margot. And then she told me, she said, I realized that I wasn't just quitting drinking because of you. I needed to quit drinking. And so she became sober for herself. And then I'm trying to remember the years. It's kind of, you know, it was a long time ago, but my son was 2. So I guess it was 21 years ago. See, I have markers where I can remember.
Yeah.
we had an intervention for Greg. And so that was 21 years ago. And we were sitting at a friend's house in Chicago, and everybody just pouring their hearts out as you do in an intervention. And here my mom was speaking from strength. I was speaking from strength, you know, because it's not like, oh, do as I say, not as I do at all. It was like, I see the sign. And I had talked to him for many years in between about, you know, I think you should probably think about not using, you know. And but anyway, in that intervention, he looked at my dad and said, you're next, you know. And bless his heart, you know, Greg's chin was shaken and he looked like he was 4 years old. And that was when I took him to Hazelden.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so my dad never had another drink after that. And I don't think my dad's an alcoholic or an addict. He's just, some people are weird like that. They just don't, you know, he's like, okay.
So the whole family, so you, your dad and your mom all quit drinking. And so was a lot of it because to support Greg at the same time?
No, see, I got sober before anybody.
Okay.
And I just, I knew it wasn't going to work for me. And my, you know how I explained it when my kids were little, when they were little, I would talk about my off switch was broken. And that was the best way I could explain it. I mean, not, you know, I'd say not every time I would drink, something bad would happen, but anytime something bad would happen, drinking was involved. So,
Right. Yeah. Right.
You know, and, my kids grew up in a sober home. Both, you know, I met my husband at an AA meeting, and I was like 4 years clean, or even more than that. I forget. He had a year under his belt because the sponsor said, you know, you can't date anyone unless you have a year under your belt. And he did an open talk and asked me to it. So,
and you've been married. You've been married, and yeah, I mean, you have a great life.
Yeah, I mean absolutely.
I mean,
awesome life. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. I have so many questions for you, but you know, we talk about you know, co-occurring disorders. Did Greg have I know he had ADD on some level, because he used to say, he said to me, and I still use this line, switching channels. you're changing channels. So I always tell people, like, listen, we're switching around our channels, but we'll get back.
We'll get back to you.
We'll get back
it's
to
like,
you.
I'll circle back in a minute.
Yeah, the changing channel. So this is what I'm telling you. Like, I felt this this unbelievable connection, and as
It's about identification.
yeah, and it like, and I remember we're sitting here. I was in Boston, and we were talking by phone, and we talked for, I don't even know, maybe 3 hours, telling me all the things I should be doing with my life. He was telling me, but it was like, but there were kernels of truth in that, right? There was kernels, and I knew it was coming from love. So tell us about the other question I have is the NFL. Does the NFL actually address mental health issues right now, or do you know, are they really kind of focusing in on this, or is it something on their agenda at all?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. My son, Quinn, is 23, and he and I were talking, and he said, I really want to spearhead bringing this and blowing it up UG style. And I really want there to be like a mental check that makes it, normalize it. So it's not just some random thing that people are scared to talk about, because, you think about high school sports or even younger than that. Before you can step on the field, you have to have a physical.
Right.
So I think maybe if we could figure out a way to have the mental aspect of mental health, wellness check aspect of it. And it's so difficult because of the invasion of privacy. And so we're just kind of trying to massage different ideas, but with all the different people that Greg has known and how many people are affected, I don't think anybody can say, I don't know anybody that does. I mean, honestly, everybody knows somebody, if not in their immediate family.
Well, he was a pioneer too. I mean, as far as a pioneer in the sense that he was talking about mental health 10 years ago, right?
Oh, and more.
Longer ago. And really try to use his platform, with NAMI. He worked with NAMI in Detroit to try and help. So
I mean, there's only three things that I'm positive about. There's always going to be taxes. Everybody has mental health issues. I don't care who they are, and no one gets out alive. Other than those three things, we can make changes. But everybody has issues. I don't care who they are.
Yeah, 1 in 5 people suffer with mental health issues in the country. So, and it might even be going. It might even be 1 in 4. Who knows? So Margot. Okay, so now you're trying to. I was, first of all, I was thoroughly impressed how quickly you got a foundation set up.
Well, I have no issues either.
No, of course, no, none of us do. I always say the people who are the sickest are the ones who never talk about it.
There you go.
There's another saying I think I've heard around. You're only as sick as your darkest secret. I don't know where I heard that one from, but
really being open, honest about it. So you got a foundation up lightning quick. I was like thoroughly impressed by how fast you got this done, and you are trying to. You started the Gregory H. Montgomery Jr. Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the upcoming event that you are putting together as well? There's Greg right there. He's cooler than school. He was cooler than school.
That's exactly right. My son, I was writing his obit, or I was writing something, I don't know. And Quinn said, he made eating a pretzel look cool. I'm like, isn't that cool? The truth? Like, he was just a cool cat.
So, it's funny. When we were in San Francisco, and I was in the Giants store, and I'm a neurotic person when it comes to baseball hats. Like, I'm sick. So I'm trying on hats, and he's sitting there with me taking pictures of the back of my head. Like, he goes, dude, not you, right? Dude, it's not you. And I was like going to buy a shirt. He goes, that's issue. He goes, which is what they hand out to, the player. That's issue. You don't want issue.
You don't want issue.
Right? It's just like, dude, you're so like, whatever it was, he had it. So,
it's true. It's so true. So, I wanted to, I didn't know what else to do but to make a foundation. You know what I mean?
Right.
literally still licking our wounds from losing my mom. She was awesome. And, you know, and my dad's awesome too. I mean, here I'm a parent. And so I take a step back and I think of everything they went through together as a couple. And as a parent now, you know, I just can't even, you know. So anyway, I know how badly I felt and how the trauma, it really is a trauma. And as a sister, you know,
Right.
And so I was sitting in a chair and I just started typing, and in my notes on my phone, I was just typing away. And I was like, this can't be. If this can happen to Greg and to us, this can't be. I mean, somebody that was handsome, and you talk about stud. I mean, come on. Like,
I saw the girlfriend. She was beautiful. What was her name?
Oh, Nancy.
Was that, no, the one he lived down in, with Lydia, the one he lived with? Is that who it was?
No, Nancy was his Michigan State girlfriend, and they've always had a great connection over the years.
Okay.
And yeah, and I'm still close with Nancy. She's amazing.
Okay.
And that's the thing my mom said before she died. She said, and this sounds horrible, but she said, you know, I'm so glad that they never ended up getting married and having kids, because Greg knew better. Because Greg, and as sad as it is, he knew that he wasn't going to be there for children the way he should be, I think. And that's why he became UG, like Uncle Greg. He loved his nieces and nephews like no other. And, you know, my kids, in seeing Greg's struggles, they loved him all bumps and bruises. They knew he could be kooky, but they also knew that he was on the level. He would just talk to them like people. And I think children need to be talked to like people and not like, la, la, la. You know, it's like, no.
Agree. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
But that was an education for them that, you know, knock on everything so far, you know, I think they were educated from the get-go with people that use or self-medicate. We're big talkers. I'm a big communicator, you know, eyeball to eyeball. That's my thing. I'm like, let's talk it out, you know, and a lot of that was because of Greg. Right. You know, and something that I have to tell you that is probably my most cherished compliment is my brother would always tell me, he said, "You're a super mom." And, you know, yeah. But it's because
you're a
I
super
learned
sister
a lot.
too.
Thanks.
You're a super sister too.
So you have the event coming up for the foundation to Ultimate Growth Foundation.
Yep.
Which is about, I'll let you tell it, but.
Well, so the Gregory Hugh Montgomery Jr. Foundation for Ultimate Growth, we had to put in the UG, and he was very much, as you know, Andy, big on nicknames, you know.
Yeah, Ando.
Ando.
Clank, 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 clank. Clank, 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 clank.
That's so awesome. Yeah. I grew up being called sis, and obviously for obvious reasons, but also when I was a little girl, someone would say, "Oh, what's your name?" And I'd say Dargo Gummy. Well, then for the rest of my life, and it was Margot Montgomery, right? For the rest of my life, Greg called me Dargo. And so
Dargo.
I just posted on Facebook this, I look back to, my birthday was just a couple days ago.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And firsts are not fun. And after losing people, you know, and anyway, I looked back to my text messages and I found one from Greg, and it said, "Go Dargo, it's your birthday." And can you hear him saying that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Go Dargo. Yeah.
He said, "Go Dargo, it's your birthday." You know, and I was like, I love that I have that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, we're doing to raise money. We're doing a golf. At first, it was because I have no issues at all.
Right.
At first, it was going to be a golf tournament because Greg was a wonderful golfer and he loved the game. There are many pictures of my brother improving my dad's swing, which I'm sure my dad was thrilled about.
Sure.
But anyway, so at first it was going to be a golf tournament, and then I play tennis. I just got back from playing tennis, and I said,
Tennis.
wait a minute. So the name of it is for FORE for golf, love for tennis, for love and wellness is the name of the event. And it's down in Naples. And what we're doing is I need sponsors up the wahoo. And we need to sponsor holes and sponsor courts. And they're all different types of levels of sponsorship. And you can go to our website and check us out. It's
Cool.
ultimategrowthfoundation.org is the name of the website. And I mean, anything will help, truly. And we just want to help. I mean, if anybody, well, you knew Greg, Andy, but anybody that met him connected on a serious, huge level. And we just want that to continue. And it keeps him close, quite honestly. It's very selfish of me,
Sure.
but it keeps him close with me. But also there's such a need. And right now, I feel like I want to be a vessel to fund programs. I saw the Harris, was it the Harris Project?
Yes.
Yes.
I forget her name.
Stephanie
Okay.
Marcasano.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I saw that and I was just like, I was blown away. I'm like, I want to be you when I grow up.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people say, oh, so what's your foundation all about? I'm like, I don't know. I applied for a nonprofit and I'm in the process of getting our 501c3. That's a process, but you know, since September 30th, we got our EIN number. So we're on our way.
Okay.
And anyway, when I saw what she was doing and I said, okay, I don't have that capacity yet. I said, but if I can put on events and raise money and give it to people that can educate it and educate people and make a difference. So when you say, tell us about your foundation, truly, it was like, I'm going to ask everybody and their brother for money to help me help people, period. In Greg's name.
Love it. Love it. And we're going to, I want to talk to you about it because I actually have a tennis player that I had on my other show who might really be interested. She was number 2 in the world at one point, Andrea Jaeger. Played in Wimbledon, and she. It's interesting. I know we're running out of time, but I know that. So Andrea actually was number 2 in the world for 5 years. Played in Wimbledon against Martina Navratilova. She ended up leaving tennis and ended up becoming a Presbyterian or a Episcopalian nun.
Oh my God.
Given all her money to charity.
Wow.
Her foundation, she started a foundation, but she lives in Florida. So, so I have some people to connect with, and I'm all in to help, whatever I can do.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely, whatever I can do to help. So, give the foundation website one more time.
It's ultimategrowthfoundation.org.
Awesome. Margot, thank you. Thank you for coming on
so much.
and sharing your story. And we can talk offline. I will make an intro to Stephanie, who is actually Willie's contact, who I've stolen from you, Willie.
Yeah.
But she's lovely. So thanks again to Margot Montgomery Moran. I said
right.
Dargo Gummy. And
Dargo
Gummy. And thanks to Kristen Perry Long, Willie Drinkwater.
You guys rock.
Thank you. You too. And Michael Weber back at Mission Control. And we will see you next week on The Map.
The Map.
Have a great week, everybody.
All right.
That's awesome. Take care.
Bye-bye.